Since late February, our coworker, John Beaver, has been in the hospital, spent months in the ICU, and just received a double lung transplant. He got the flu. It turned into double pneumonia, and it went downhill from there. And we've been giving you updates throughout the weeks and months about it, and we have asked you to pray for time to time, and those prayers have been answered. He seems to be doing much better. We wanted to bring the doctor on so that everybody could find out what's going on. Dr. Charles DeVette, you are chief of Barnes Jewish Cardiothoracic ICU. Doctor, welcome to KTRS.
Good morning, McGraw.
So give us an update on John. He's doing well, right?
So I saw John yesterday. He's doing much better. He's been out of the ICU for almost a week now, and he's actually off oxygen, so he's still very weak. He's getting physical therapy, and I think that's one of his main challenges at this time is just to get stronger.
Let's start at the beginning. The last time we saw him, he was sick as a dog. We said, go home. You've got the flu. The next thing we know, he was in the hospital. How did he get so sick?
So he was one of the really unlucky guys. So despite getting the flu shot, he still got the flu and got really, really sick. So many patients, when they get the flu, they eventually get better. John was just very unlucky, and it proceeded to pneumonia to the point where his oxygen levels were so low that despite the traditional ways of ventilating patients, he was not getting better. And so he actually had to be placed on a machine called ECMO, where we take his blood outside of his body and then add oxygen to it and then put it back in the body to help maintain his oxygen levels.
How long was he on that machine for?
Until his transplant.
So 3 months?
Since March, since early March when he got admitted.
And this is a man in his 30s, healthy. Yeah. He, up until then, running races. And
right, yeah. Very active, very active lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it traditional flu? Was it swine flu? Was it H1N1?
H1N1 is actually the swine flu. Yes, that's what he got. So he did get his vaccination. I actually asked him about it.
He got
yesterday.
it here in the studio.
That's what he told me, yes. Mm-hmm. But, despite that, some people will still get the flu.
So it was the H1N1 flu that he got. So his lungs were so bad, he needed a transplant.
He eventually needed a transplant. Initially, when we had him on the ECMO, the machine where we put oxygen into his body, the hope was that eventually he will get better, that his lungs would get better, and that we could wean him off this machine. But despite everything, he clearly wasn't getting better, and there was so much scar tissue that had formed in his lungs that he just couldn't breathe by himself.
So he was on this machine and basically in a self-induced coma for months.
He was initially sedated for a while, and then at some point the machine was moved to the point where we could start waking him up. So at that point...
he had to get stronger to get the lung transplant.
So even with this ECMO machine going into his body, he was getting physical therapy. At some point, getting up out of bed, and with the help of fantastic physical therapists, he was walking in the ICU. At some point, he even was able to leave the ICU to go outside. You can imagine being in the hospital for so long.
Right.
It gets very, very depressing.
We found out that he was okayed for a lung transplant, and then it seemed like a day or two later, you got the lungs. It just seemed like he was on that list for only a very short time.
Yeah, because he was so sick, he was on the list for a relatively short time.
And do we know anything about the donor of the lungs?
Usually we don't ask that. I mean, certainly that's known to the transplant team, but in the ICU we typically do not ask that.
I think we should, though, at least make mention that because of someone's generosity,
exactly,
our friend John Beaver is alive today.
Exactly.
And so that goes to the point whereas if for whatever reason you find yourself in a situation, you need to sign your donor card so that you could then save a life of somebody else.
Exactly. That's very important.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so what happens now? He's has the transplant. He's out of ICU.
Yes. So, immediately after the transplant, our first goal was to get him off the ventilator. So just because John was so weak, this wasn't an easy transplant. It was a very challenging transplant. He lost a lot of blood, so he was very swollen after the transplant. So it took a couple of days to actually get him off the ventilator. And then it took a couple of days just to get him stronger to the point where he can get up. And so it's like I said, it's been about a week since he's been discharged from the ICU, where he's in a rehab unit within our hospital, where he's getting more physical therapy, antibiotics and immunosuppressive drugs. And again, the main goal right now is just to get him stronger.
His body has accepted the transplant?
Again, he's off oxygen, so he's actually doing well as far as his lungs are
So
concerned.
he's breathing on his own?
He's breathing on his own.
Wow.
He's talking. He's eating. That was one of John's main focuses and challenges as he was getting stronger. I remember John really loved to eat a good steak.
Yes, he's a good American, yes. So, prognosis, a full recovery?
So, obviously that's our hope, a full recovery.
Right. How much longer do you think he'll have to be in the hospital?
That's the very same question John asked me yesterday. Obviously, he's ready to go. Yeah. That will depend on his lung transplant doctors.
Right.
They obviously want to make sure that everything is as good as it can be and that he's certainly strong enough to go home.
Okay. So the rumor that he was faking is not true.
That's certainly not
okay,
true.
That's not true. All right, good. Because, this has been a long vacation for the guy. When do you think maybe he might walk in the door and start working again?
He's certainly very eager. I asked him about that yesterday, and he's ready to come back to work.
Does he miss us?
He certainly does.
Because we don't really miss him all that much. Talk for a moment, because we did a whole show on this. The man's got world-class treatment for 6 months now. The cost has got to be astronomical.
Yeah, it must be. If you imagine just, he's needed physical therapy. He's had cardiac surgeons working with him. He's had lung surgeons working with him, the transplant doctors, ICU physicians, cardiac anesthesiologist, many nurses in the ICU.
The flight over from Edwardsville was $35,000.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on.
How does anybody wrap their head around that in terms of you can never pay for that, right? And luckily the man had insurance, but even if he has insurance doesn't cover. What happens now?
Yeah, certainly trying to raise some money is very, very important.
And I know the doctors. There's a separation there. You don't see the bills. You don't care about the bills. You only worry about what you can do to get them better.
Exactly. That's our main focus on a day-to-day basis. Just do what is best for John.
Right. And as a doctor, you don't know if they have insurance or they don't have insurance. That's not your call.
We treat everybody the same.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
It's amazing. And again, he had the flu shot. What do you tell people who don't get a flu shot? Flu season's going to be here around the corner.
I think it's just irresponsible not to get the flu shot. Just because one person got the flu despite getting the flu shot doesn't mean you shouldn't get the flu shot. It's still your absolute best defense is to get the flu shot.
Now, we work in such close proximity with him. He's literally, he works right there. Mm-hmm. So we all get the flu shot. He gets the H1N1, but the rest of us didn't. Could you say since we got the flu shot, we didn't catch it from him? Is that possible?
That's certainly possible. Yeah, you can, anytime you're in close proximity to somebody with the flu, you're certainly at risk of catching it. And certainly if you've had the flu shot, that will give you some protection. But again, we know the flu shot is not 100% effective, but that's certainly the best we can do.
Yeah. Saturday, September 6th, his friends are getting together, and of course, with all the help of KTRS, we're having a fundraiser for him. It's going to be a trivia night. We'll talk more about that as we get closer, but that's Saturday, September 6th. A lot of people are asking about how they can help and want to know. So just sort of keep that night open, and we're going to raise as much money as we can for our good friend John Beaver. Charles DeVette, just like the person you take the dog to Chief of Barnes Jewish Cardiothoracic ICU. Doctor, we sit around and talk and giggle and tell stories all day long. You're in the life-saving business. To us, it's science fiction, what you do each and every day. Taking lungs from somebody and putting them into somebody else, that's just science fiction.
Yeah, it's not just me. Like I said, there's a huge team of doctors working on him. You've got experts in lung transplant surgery. You've got experts in lung transplant pulmonology. You've got cardiac surgeons, thoracic surgeons, cardiac anesthesiologists, nurses that are experts in their field, physical therapists, pharmacists. the list goes on and on and on and on.
His family has stayed in the hospital this entire time, not going home. I mean, we tried to get them to go home, but they just will not leave.
He's got an incredible family support. You know, I can tell you so many stories. His dad, absolutely. I remember the first day they got John out of the room with physical therapy and a walker to try and get him to walk. His one leg was so weak that his dad was actually picking up his leg to help him walk.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of tells you, when you have loved ones and family and friends there backing you up, that means a world of difference in your recovery.
Yeah. Has he met any cute nurses over there at Barnes Jewish?
He's been very, very lucky as far as that is concerned.
I'm sure he's been milking this for as long as he can. Hello, honey. I don't feel so well. Bring me a little Jell-O. All right, Beav, we know you're listening. Hurry back because David Solomon ain't doing the board work the way you do it. Dr. Charles DeVette, Chief of Barnes Jewish Cardiothoracic ICU. Doctor, thank you very much, and give our best to all the doctors over there.
I will. Thank you so much.
732 KTRS.